He didn't just leave home. He walked away from love, identity, and everything that once protected him. There was once a man who had two sons. He was a wealthy landowner, respected in his community, and known for his fairness and kindness. His land produced crops year after year, and his household was full of servants who worked diligently under his care. His two sons grew up in this home, surrounded by provision, guidance, and love. But while they shared the same roof, they carried very different hearts within them. The younger son, restless and impatient, often looked beyond the fields he had grown up in. He watched travelers pass by their land and wondered what life was like outside his father's estate. To him, home began to feel restrictive. The rules felt unnecessary, the routine felt boring. And slowly, gratitude turned into dissatisfaction. One day, with a heart full of ambition and a mind already far from home, the younger son approached his father. His words were bold, almost shocking. He asked for his share of the inheritance. In that culture, such a request was deeply offensive. An inheritance was only divided after a father's death. What the son was truly saying was, "I don't want to wait. I don't want your authority. I want what belongs to me now." The servants likely held their breath. The older son probably froze in disbelief. But the father, instead of reacting in anger, looked at his son with quiet sorrow. He knew what this request meant, yet with a heavy heart, he agreed. He divided his property and gave the younger son his portion. Not many days later, the younger son gathered everything he had: money, possessions, dreams, and left home. He traveled to a distant country, far from the watchful eyes of family and community. There, he finally tasted what he believed was freedom. At first, life was exciting. The money flowed easily. He made friends quickly. He spent lavishly on pleasure, parties, and comfort. Wherever he went, doors opened because wealth speaks loudly. Laughter surrounded him, and for a moment, he felt alive, he felt powerful, he felt independent. But wealth has a way of disappearing quietly. Over time, the money ran out. The friends who once crowded around him vanished just as quickly as they had appeared. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, a severe famine struck the land. Jobs became scarce. Food became expensive. And suddenly, the young man who once lived in abundance found himself desperate. With no options left, he hired himself out to a local farmer who sent him to work in the fields feeding pigs. For a Jewish man, this was rock bottom. Pigs were considered unclean animals. The work was degrading. The smell was unbearable. Hunger gnawed at him so deeply that he began to long for the food the pigs ate, yet no one gave him anything. It was there, in the dirt, surrounded by filth and silence, that clarity finally came. He remembered home. He remembered his father. He remembered the servants who lived better than he now did. And for the first time since leaving, he truly saw the cost of his choices. He said to himself that he had sinned against heaven and against his father. He knew he no longer deserves to be called a son. All he wanted was survival, so he rehearsed a speech in his mind, not to reclaim his position, but to beg for mercy. He decided to return home, not as a son, but as a servant. The journey back was long and heavy. Every step carried shame. Every mile replayed his failures. He imagined his father's disappointment, his brother's anger, and the community's judgment. Yet hunger and humility pushed him forward. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him. Day after day, the father had watched the road, hoping, believing that his son might return. And when he finally recognized that familiar walk, thin and broken, he didn't hesitate. He ran. An elderly man running was unheard of, but love overpowered dignity. Before the son could finish his rehearsed apology, the father embraced him. He wrapped his arms around him and kissed him. The son tried to confess, to explain, to beg, but the father wasn't listening to shame. He was listening to repentance. The father called for the servants. He ordered the best robe to be placed on his son's shoulders. He put a ring on his finger, a symbol of authority and belonging. He placed sandals on his feet, restoring his dignity. Then he commanded that the fattened calf be killed. A feast was prepared, music filled the air. My son was dead, the father said, and is alive again. He was lost and now is found. Meanwhile, the older son returned from the fields and heard celebration. When he learned the reason for the feast, anger burned within him. He refused to enter the house. Years of silent resentment rose to the surface. He reminded his father of his loyalty, his obedience, and the fact that he had never been rewarded like this. The father went out to him too. Gently, he reminded him that everything he had was already his. But the celebration wasn't about reward, it was about restoration. A broken family had been healed. A lost son had come home. The story doesn't end with punishment or revenge. It ends with an invitation to forgiveness, to humility, and to love that waits even when wounded, because the true power of the story isn't the son who left. It's the father who never stopped watching the road.